Hey guys, this is Cyber Surgeon. I'm just going to take a few quick minutes to explain to you why the Warrior talent tree, the Protection talent tree, is the best tanking talent tree in WoW. Uh, Mostly for the flexibility and the choices that are provided that you really don't get in any of the other tanking talent trees. I believe that Blizzard really captured the essence of what they set out to do with the new talent trees in the Protection talent tree. This is, of course, all in my own opinion, and I'm going to preface this with saying this is assuming you have not made the choice to be an absolutely simmed min-maxing master. If you made that choice, you're intentionally restricting your talent options, and so the choice that Blizzard attempts to provide for you is negated. The footage that you see in the background for this podcast is mostly just garbage footage of me leveling. So feel free not to watch it. You can put this on in the background unless you're really interested in watching a warrior level up for some reason. But I'm going to start with just every tier of the talent tree and explain why, in my opinion, the choice presented there makes it the best talent tree for tanking. Starting with the tier 15 talents. For most people, they just see this as 3 different ways to modify charge, with double time being the obvious best choice, giving you 2 charges of charge. While that is very true, double time is going to be the most flexible and the most useful in most situations. There are times when Warbringer will shine. I can think mostly on older content. I don't actually know off the top of my head where that's going to come in Warlords of Draenor. But having that 12-second root stun, there are targets such as the spider, the drones on Beth-Talak in Firelands, for example, where being able to immediately stun the target you're trying to intersect, the root will not give you an interrupt. You would have to waste an additional global cooldown. Where having that on your Warbringer, you don't need it more than once every 20 seconds anyway, and giving you that stun provides you with that extra utility that is, very necessary for that fight. In the second tier is where things start to get a little bit more interesting, with Enraged Regeneration versus Second Wind versus Impending Victory. This comes more with what you're doing at the time, provides you with that flexibility. Enraged Regeneration is fantastic as a raid cooldown. It's an additional 10% of your health, an additional 20 seconds over 5 seconds. Nice little bit of healing that you can provide for yourself. But that does not make Second Wind or Impending Victory not have their place. Impending Victory is fantastic for soloing. It resets the cooldown every time you kill a mob. That gives you experience or honor. Fantastic. It would also be great for PvP in that it's doing the additional damage on top of what Victory Rush would already do. It gives you that 15% healing up front, so you don't have to wait until you already have a kill. It's great for starting a series of fights, and it will reset every time you kill something. Second Wind is great for some solo content, things where you don't have someone to heal you. As soon as you hit 35% health, you get that 10% leech, 10% lifesteal for most players or anything like that. And it's nice to keep yourself from dying. When you hit the third tier at 45, then you start getting things that actually start to change how your playstyle works. Heavy Repercussions is Shield Slam. It's increases the damage of Shield Slam by 30% when Shield Block or Shield Charge is active. That's going to come more into play with Gladiator's Resolve further down, but I think it is a nice option for if you do need some additional DPS, but you don't want to have to change really what you're doing. Sudden Death gives you some more additional DPS, but actually does change your playstyle a little bit because it's going to make executes start happening more often earlier in the fight, which does change your global cooldown usage and things like that. And then Unyielding Strikes, I think, is kind of the biggest dud talent outside of Juggernaut in the talent tree. Every talent tree's got one. Just some makes your heroic strikes free every time you stack it up 6 times. But you already have a free proc and ultimatum, so I don't really like that one. I'm not going to talk about it too much. But the other two, Sudden Death versus Heavy Repercussions, give you 2 actual options in the way that you want to play, particularly if you take the Gladiator's Resolve talent further down. And then the next 3 tiers, 60, 75, and 90, are where your playstyle, or all 4 tiers after this are where your play style is really flexible, and the choices that you make, you are free to make in the talent tree as a tank, because your DPS in most guilds is not the key factor. Most people, this is assuming not min-maxers, but just the average player, is not concerned about whether or not their DPS is simulated, their tank DPS is simulated to the absolute max if it comes with some additional utility. At the 60 tier, you have Stormbolt, Shockwave, and Dragon Roar. All 3 are fantastic for CC, and they provide very different situations of when you would want to use them. Stormbolt is awesome if you're off tanking, you're picking up one stunnable target, but you also want to be able to provide that extra damage when you're stuck on the boss, because say the ad's not up, like you're fighting Norshen, there's no manifestations. You're getting that additional damage from Stormbolting the boss. Shockwave is, in my opinion, one of the best picking up groups talents that a tank could possibly have. You charge into it, you Shockwave, it's a 4-second stun to every enemy in that cone. And normally, as we know, the ads that you pick up in a raid encounter, the little ads that you would use this on, are normally stunnable. So you can basically negate that entire pack for 4 seconds by hitting them with that Shockwave. And it cuts its cooldown in half. It's a 20-second cooldown if you hit at least 3 targets. And then Dragon Roar is the higher DPS one. If you need to instantly burst a small, squishy pack of ads, Dragon Roar would be where you want to go. If the stun is not necessary, but you still are functioning in that same role, you take Dragon's Roar instead of Shockwave, because then you can charge in there, do a big burst of damage, guaranteed critical strike that ignores all armor, and get the job done, get back to the boss. So those are, you have a choice to make based off of how the encounter works, and that's really what I'm focusing on, where the choices lie. That's how the talent tree is supposed to work. It's not supposed to be a balancing issue. It's supposed to be about choice. When you get to the tier 75 talents, you're looking at Mass Spell Reflection versus Safeguard versus Vigilance. And I think this is an awesome set of talents for a tank to have. As a DPS, these are kind of stupid. But as a tank, all 3 of these are amazing talents. And in my opinion, they're the best talents for tanks altogether. Because not only do they allow you to provide some protection to the tank, or to the raid, but they also allow you to compensate for a raid member who sucks. And a lot of the time, you don't have that option as a tank in your talents. Unless you're a paladin and you can blessing or protection somebody, you're pretty much screwed. If a DPS is in the wrong spot at the wrong time, they're gonna die. Unless you can do something about it, and this gives you those choices. Mass Spell Reflect, if someone's about to get hit by some huge spell because they're out of position or something like that, you just Mass Spell Reflect. You're going to save them from that spell. Obviously, it's not going to work in every situation, but in the situations where it can work, that's a huge cooldown to use, and it's only 30-second cooldown, and it's a 5-second window. So it's really nice to negate magic damage. In Warlords of Draenor, though, it's not actually going to be that big of a deal. Played in the beta, most of the raids are highly physical damage. So Mass Spell Reflection is going to kind of fall by the wayside, at least for the initial tier. And that's where these next 2 talents are going to shine. Safeguard versus Vigilance. These 2 talents basically do the exact same thing as far as protecting your raid members goes. One of them, Safeguard, replaces your Intervene and gives you a 20% damage reduction on whoever you intervene to. Still have that same Intervene mechanic where you intercept the next melee or range attack that's going towards them, but you also give them that 20-second damage taken reduction buff. It has a 30-second cooldown, so it's going to be used often, but to a lesser effect. And then you have the other side, Vigilance, 2-minute cooldown, but it's a 12-second window of 30% damage reduction. So it's a bigger cooldown. It functions more like your standard cooldown options. And I think that's a fantastic choice to be made between Safeguard and Vigilance based off of how your raid functions and how often you're going to need to cover for somebody. If you have to cover for multiple people, often getting Safeguard is amazing. That's 20% of it. That is a minor defensive cooldown that you can apply to anyone in your raid at any point in time, every 30 seconds. And there's been times where that 20% damage reduction is the difference between a wipe because we lose a major DPS or a healer, and them surviving with 5% HP, getting healed up, and we continue and get the kill. And then Vigilance, if we've all been in the raid where there's this one guy who cannot stop dying, and everybody's got one. You hit them with Vigilance right before you know they're about to take the damage. You cut that damage in a third. They survive. You keep your battle res, keep everybody happier. No one's getting frustrated with them. And it's better not only for the morale of your raid group, but it also means you're going to be more successful in the encounter. You don't have a dead guy. I think that choice, being able to be, that flexibility based off of your own personal situation, and of course some of the boss mechanics, is fantastic. And it's really a defensive choice for the tank to make that really no other tanks have in their talent tree. When you hit 90, things get a little bit boring for tanks. 70 versus 90. 90 is awesome for the DPS. 75 is awesome for the tanks. But I do want to point out that there is a lot of choice to be made in the level 90 tier. Bladestorm, obviously the best choice for an AoE situation. Gives you an AoE DPS cooldown, makes you, you're immune to all movement and parrying and control effects while you do it. And the awesome part for tanks is you can still use defensive cooldowns while Bladestorming. And you can also taunt. So it's great for being the person who needs to pick up ads and do AoE damage. And then you have a very interesting choice between Avatar and Bloodbath on single target DPS. If you have a lot of multi-strike, Bloodbath begins to really shine because it not only makes your auto attacks and your regular attacks get a bleed, but their multi-strikes get additional bleeds. So that is one that, based off of how you're gearing, changes where that talent would fall in the priority. And then if you really don't have a whole lot of multi-strike, you're going to really want to take, Avatar, get that additional 20% damage without having, a whole lot of difference in what you're going, in what you're doing normally. And then you get down to the bottom tier, the level 100 talents, which is where I love the Warrior Protection talent tree. Absolutely love it. This is what sold the Warriors to me for Warlords of Draenor. And that's the difference between Anger Management, Ravager, and Gladiator stance. Initially, I was against Gladiator stance, to be entirely honest. I didn't really see why the Warriors needed a third DPS option. But if you're just looking at it from the Protection Warrior standpoint, it gives Protection Warriors a level of freedom that no other tank has. No other tank can put up competitive DPS, especially since Vigilance is gone and it's resolved. No other tank is going to be able to put up competitive DPS while still sword and boarding, while still using the exact same abilities that a tanking tree and just switching a stance. Granted, you can't switch it during combat, so it's not exactly like a cat going into bear form kind of a situation, but you still have most of your damage coming from the exact same abilities you're using before. And especially if you take the Relentless Shield Slam talent from further up, you get additional 30% damage on your Shield Slam, which is where the core of your damage comes from in Gladiator stance. Well, outside of Deep Wounds. And then you get a meaningful choice between Anger Management and Ravager. Ravager is basically Warrior Consecrate, and I love it. It's you throw your axe. It functions the exact same as it does with Nazgrim. Big ass axe goes flying, spins around in a circle, hits everything in there, generates some additional threat for your tank. It's awesome. You don't have so warriors who already have unparalleled mobility as a tank now have an option to not move and pick up ads anyway. An option that they kind of lacked before outside of Mocking Bennett. And then you also get Anger Management, which if you're someone who's weaving cooldowns very effectively, is going to be fantastic. Every 30 rage you burns a second off of your cooldowns. That includes all of your defensive cooldowns. So if you're someone who is really good at weaving your cooldowns, or maybe your gear kind of sucks and you really have to hammer your shield wall all the time, then that's going to help you get your shield walls back faster and help you stay alive, help your raid get through. So there's meaningful choices to be made in that tier based off of what you're trying to do. Really, in my opinion, for the Protection Warrior, there's no talent tier that has the one obvious go-to in every situation because the other two talents kind of suck. Kind of a situation like there is in pretty much every other tanking tier except like the Blood DK. Reason that their DPS choice is the best is because they actually have a legitimate DPS choice in their talent tier. No other tank has that. You have to respec. You have to change your playstyle. You have to change everything you're doing in order to contribute to your, to your raid meaningfully as damage. Protection Warriors no longer have to do that. You have Gladiator stance. You can continue to do damage, competitive damage. It sims very well, in non-burst situations at least. It sims fantastic. So you provide competitive DPS to your raid without having to change your playstyle a whole lot, and that's something that no other tank even comes close to. So I know that was a little rambly. I'm sorry, I didn't actually work out a script for this one. This was more just I had to get it out. And so the further videos in this series will be a little bit more concise, a little bit less rambly, I do promise. So thank you for sticking with me on this one. Please let me know in the comments whether or not you agree, whether or not you disagree, if you would like to see some real footage instead of garbage footage while these podcasts go on, anything like that. And please, if you like the video, please make sure to comment, rate, and subscribe. It'll really help me out a lot to let me know what kind of stuff you guys like to see. So thank you very much, guys. Have a good one.